I work in the greater Boston region. I supervise a cohort of youth. And at the Food Project, we like to think that it is a right, not a privilege, for everyone to have access to fresh, local, affordable food. And by that, where we are today is a step in that direction. We are in the Langdon Street Farm in downtown Roxbury. We started working on this farm 25 years ago in 1995. So shout out to all the work that had been done here and all the history here. This land, before the Food Project started working on it, it was a dump. It wasn't well kept. It was crazy weeds all over the place, and so the land was given to the Food Project. It's a half acre, so it's not that big, and in it, as you can see, it's really a really awesome site to see in the middle of downtown Roxbury. And so that ultimately leads to a question I have for you all, which is, do you all know what a food system is? Please type in your comments. I want to know what you all know about the food system.
While the audience is typing in their answers, I will take a guess that a food system, thinks about how we grow our food, and then how our food is processed, and then how it gets to wherever we're going to purchase it from. So kind of, I would imagine the whole process from where it starts to how it ends up on my plate. But let's see, we'll also leave it up to the audience to see what they think too.
Yeah, and kind of going off what you were saying, there are multiple steps in the food system. And I think that's really awesome to know that there's more than one way to get food from where it starts and where it's seeded to ultimately your table, your plate at home.
Our audience is a little slow at answering, so I will pepper in some of their answers as they come in. But please let us know, what do you think a food system is?
Okay. At the Food Project, we like to define the food system as a process from seed to fork. And that takes shape in a variety of different ways. A global and a local food system. An example of the global food system is this avocado. This avocado cannot be grown in Massachusetts because these winters get a little bit rough. And so, even so, the weather can be really tough in the wintertime. I can still go to any local supermarket of mine and get an avocado. And that kind of explains the global food system in a way, because this gets grown in warmer parts of the country, different parts of the world, and yet through pesticides, through chemicals that make it take a little bit longer to ripen, being in trucks, delivery, it takes a long time for this to be picked, probably a month ago, and it take all that time to get into your local supermarket. So that's definitely an example of the global food system. As the local food system, it looks a little bit more different. So if you could follow me, take you on a little trip to the farm.
Ooh, this is a virtual field trip.
Yeah, virtual field trip. So here we have these tomato plants were seeded probably 6 to 8 weeks ago in a greenhouse, and in the greenhouse they were transplanted over here. And as you can see here by some of the plants, they're not all the way ready yet to be eaten or harvested, unless you like bean tomatoes. But yeah, this shows kind of like the in-between process of growing food and how it takes time. And if you care to it, it will care back to you and giving you delicious food. Now I'm going to take you to something that is ready to be harvested. You can follow me. Farm. Nice cloudy day. Here we have a cucumber plant. They're also being grown vertically, and these were planted probably like a month and a half to almost 2 months ago. And here, as you can see, I'm just harvesting a cucumber that's literally, I can wash it when I go home, chop it up, and enjoy it. So this is definitely what we like to think of. The local food system is something that, doesn't have to go through all those extra steps or to get to your supermarket. So, and that ultimately kind of goes into the work that gets done here at the Food Project. As you mentioned before, I lead the Build a Garden initiative, in which community members from Dorchester, Mattapan, and Roxbury can apply for a raised bed. Myself and a cohort of youth go in and we install a 4x8 raised bed. We deliver compost to them as well, and we give them a growing guide, which is kind of gives them tips on how to grow in such a limited amount of space. On top of that, a lot of the food that you see here gets donated to hunger relief organizations across the city of Boston. It's important to have partnerships and kind of share the love of food. We all like to eat, and that's something that's really awesome. So through that work, we definitely build a lot of lasting relationships. On top of that, actually, one of the biggest parts to any food system is working here on the farms. And so in a non-pandemic world, there'd be about 36 youth working with me on the farms, learning about local food justice, social justice, and sustainable agriculture, and why, the care you put into the land by weeding, taking care of the crops, and the land will take care of you. And all this food that gets grown and gets worked on by the youth ultimately goes to farmers markets. We have a farmers market in our Dudley neighborhood that is SNAP, food stamps accessible. We grow a lot of culturally relevant crops. There's nothing like eating something that makes you feel like you're home. And so that's something we definitely try to, be intentional about the food that we grow. And it's a really awesome sight to see, like so many community members come into our farmers market to get food. As something that, as I mentioned before, we try to provide as much access to local affordable food as possible. And we know that this neighborhood, the Dudley neighborhood, has at times struggled with having access to local fresh food. So to see a greenhouse and then 2 farms, literally in Roxbury, is something that a lot of community members are curious about and it gets excited about. And in that, we can share our stories about food, land, and how much fun you can have working on the farm. And that ultimately leads to why the Food Project matters to me. I am an alumni of the Food Project. I started working at the Food Project when I was 16 years old. And you wouldn't have told me I didn't know that you can make pickles out of cucumbers. And so, in that, I learned how to cook my food, learn about farming. Farming, it's a lot more than just harvesting food or anything, anything like that. There's a plan that goes into it. There's the harvesting, there's the weeding, there's so many intercorrelated parts that, go into making a farm run. And I think that when I was 16, I didn't know that. And so I really appreciated having the opportunity to learn. And that motivates me to the work I do today. Being a supervisor, leading youth out on the farms is something that I really appreciate. And I always want to, share my excitement every day when I come into work. And so, talking about the food system and kind of giving you all some examples of the global and local food system, I have one more question in true Food Project fashion to the audience. And that is, can you all give me 2 or 3 examples of what food systems you have in your communities?
All right, you heard it here, folks. What food systems are in your communities? While you're thinking and typing in your answers, we do have a couple of questions from audience members that I want to ask you in the meantime. So something that one of our audience members wants to know about are food deserts. So could you explain what a food desert is and what are some ways to build long-lasting food systems that address that?
Oh, well, a food desert is an area that doesn't have the adequate access to crops, food. It can be, very densely packed neighborhoods that they don't have a supermarket within, I believe, a mile to a mile and a half from these neighborhoods, creating a scarcity of food. And when when there's a scarcity of, available local fresh produce, you're going to places where the food isn't as healthy and it's a lot more cheaper. And I think that's something that kind of, to go off to the second part of that question, something to make, these systems stay in these food deserts is to provide prices that are accessible to everyone. And that's why at the Food Project we have our food stamp accessible farmers markets. So that, we kind of bridge that gap to make sure that everyone has the right to some local veggies, which is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a couple people answering about their food system. My mother, Cynthia Varamo, she has a garden at her house and always goes to her local farmers market. But she also has a question about eating seasonably. So she wants to know, how can I get the freshest food from the global food system? I do try to eat seasonally to get the freshest food, to get food as fresh as possible. But if she's thinking about maybe like the avocados, right? How can she get the freshest food?
I think with that, it's something to know about what exactly you want to get. As I mentioned with the avocado, it's not grown here, but it's accessible here. So I think with that, it's also, asking your local supermarkets, asking, your farmers market, where the time it takes from, I'm using example of the avocado, from the avocado to get harvested to your supermarket. Asking those questions can kind of give you a better frame of mind to know when, things are the freshest and don't have to rely on, all those different special chemicals and treatments to make them last longer.
Mm. We also have another question about avocados from Alex Clark, who wants to know, other than demand, why have avocados risen so much in price?
That's a fantastic point. That ultimately goes back into the global food system. Price of gas fluctuates. Shipping costs fluctuate. There's labor that go into a truck driver driving from California to Texas, and then someone from Texas to the Midwest, and the Midwest to the Northeast. There's a lot of systems in place that kind of little by little increase the price of produce, and I think that's a clear example of something that it once was cheaper, but now through the world that we live in, with everything being in scarcity or the prices being raised, that's where you see those slight but like incremental changes to the prices of food that we like to consume.
Mm. So thinking about, I know that avocado, like thinking about an avocado, it's a really trendy food to eat. It's, included in, it's got all these healthy fats and all these other things. Or say you want to eat tomatoes, but, it's the middle of winter, and that's not necessarily something that you could get seasonably and locally in your area. Thinking about just a local food system, so I would just eat seasonally and locally, can I get all of the food and nutrients I need just from my local food system, or do I have to kind of branch out a little bit?
I think the beauty of that is that you can tailor it to what you like and what you need. Mm-hmm. With that, the local food system can be really creative. And that's something that, I'm a really big fan of, through Build a Garden, through the different work we do here at the Food Project, kind of to encourage that creativity. And that can mean, creating your own little greenhouse. It doesn't have to be that big. You can grow anything in the appropriate size container. You can see, magic grow, before your eyes. And I think that's really awesome. I think that's something that I would want to encourage to those who really want to stay locally and, provide to the local food system and to local farms, or them wanting to practice growing their own food, is be really creative, do your research, and you'll see that, it may not be like the abundance. I mean, you may not be able to grow a lot, but you'll be able to grow enough for what you want. And I think that's something that ultimately is super important and empowering, to be able to grow your own food.
Yeah, absolutely. And what are some things that we can do to make so I know I like a lot of folks, I go to my local grocery store. So I, walk down to the bottom of the hill, I buy my, produce and my meats and everything from my local grocery store. and then I walk back. I'm a market basket girl through and through. So how can I, what else could I do to make my food system more sustainable?
I think with that is the question. That's a great question. And with that is just kind of going back to what I was saying is kind of plan out what it is that you want to get out of the foods you want to eat. Kind of setting a plan and developing a plan of how to grow your own food or how to, have the access to be able to grow your own food is really important. And with that, you'd be able to, one, kind of support yourself, and after making a plan and after creating what you think will be the best course of action for you to grow your own food, then kind of going and reaching out to those market baskets to get the resources and the food that you need. At times, both food systems are imperfect, and I think that through the work we do here at the Food Project, we just want to bring awareness that there are two different systems in play, and there are ways in which you can kind of see yourself ebb and flow in between both.
Awesome. We have another viewer question from Facebook, Kevin Cross. He's watching with the Sullivan, Indiana Future Farmers of America members.
Whoop! Shout out.
He wants to know, what's your favorite vegetable that you grow in your urban garden and food system? And what's your most popular crop that you grow? So meaning, what's the most popular at your farmer's market?
Okay. All right. For me personally, I am a big fan of coleslaw. I love my slaw. So I think two things that I like putting in my slaw are cabbage and carrots, and we grow that on our farms here. So it's something definitely that whenever I get the chance, I harvest them real quick, and then I go make some slaw back at home. And as for this particular farm, the Langdon Street farm, the most popular crop that gets grown here is the tongue of fire beans. It's a bean grown in Cape Verde, and the Dudley neighborhood has a really big Cape Verdean population, and so that is the one thing that we grow a lot and we sell out a lot of. As it goes back to what I was saying, it's for a lot of members who aren't for where they were born or they have a history in another community. Growing culturally relevant crops kind of makes everything feel like you're at home again, and there's no better feeling than that.
Yeah, right. That's awesome. Thinking about your slaw, are you a red cabbage slaw, Napa, Savoy? What's just a green cabbage? What's your go-to?
I'm not gonna lie, I like some color.
Yeah, of course.
I think that part of growing up, around veggies and around a very diverse culture, it made me kind of like colors, and so I think that for my slaw, I try to incorporate as many colors as I can.
I mean, that's a really important thing about food that sometimes we don't think about. You eat with your eyes first, so it's something that's nutritious, but also something you're going to enjoy, like you were talking about, or the emotional connection to folks have to food. I know broccoli rabe is something that I feel very connected to because I'm Italian. So, it's something I love to cook and eat. And I think we sometimes don't necessarily think about food just from the, oh, it's good for me, I should eat it, it's here. But, all the other surrounding things that food can give us too.
Absolutely. Food is super powerful, and food brings everyone together. And I think that is something that's super, super important.
Yeah. We have a couple other questions. Someone wants to know, are there any invasive species that can cause problems with our food system? And are there any invasive species that have become part of our food system?
Yes, actually, I have two perfect responses for that. I know that at the Food Project Farms, an invasive species are potato beetles. They kind of come in and take over specific crops. They lay eggs under the leaves. So if you're trying to weed, you usually don't see them. So that's why they're kind of tricky to if they go unseen, or if they go on kind of dealt with, it can become a really big problem for a lot of crops. And to answer the question of invasive species that we've kind of added to our system, I know that we've used a specific type of wasps to kill potato beetles. And so I know that shout out to farmer Alex in Lincoln, who has literally bought wasps to kind of to control the potato beetle or just pest problem that some of our farms deal with.
Mm-hmm. How does, I'm thinking about, we talked a lot last week too about some natural pest control. So like Bobby and Nataka were telling us about planting dill between certain plants to keep bugs away, or planting basil near tomato plants. How does like more natural, or we could use the word organic, but not necessarily. How does more like natural pesticides or things like that, how does that play into the food system?
Ultimately, it's I think at times it's an underrated part of the food system, because it's something that is natural, and so you don't have to worry about any chemicals. You don't have to worry about that all those unwanted things in your food, as compared to something that goes naturally and kind of can thwart off pests. So I think definitely it's something that kind of going back to the creativity. I definitely want to just tell people to be creative, like do some research or figure out what crops work best with specific crops. Kind of like you said, like the basil next to the tomato. There are certain pests that are attracted to specific veggies, and with that, there's also veggies that they just don't like and don't and will definitely keep them away. So with that, it's just definitely being really creative in how you kind of deal with that, because if gone untreated or checked, it can be a really big nuisance to control, because then you lose your crops, and then you're not able to actively participate in your food system, and that can be that can be a bummer.
Yeah. We have a question from YouTube. Ian Bishop wants to know, do you use genetically modified seeds? And if so, are they better or worse than non-genetically modified seeds?
We do not use genetically modified seeds. And I think with that, as someone that, has some experience on the farm, I don't have too much experience with, planting seeds or knowing, what goes into what constitutes a genetically modified seed and what doesn't. And so I think with that, it's just I think my piece of advice would just try to stay away from that. And, going back to doing research, I know that, creating a local food system is a lot more than just planting something, weeding it, and then, just whatever happens. I think with that, it has to be some intentionality and some planning in terms of what you want to grow, where you want to grow it, and how it can best grow.
Yeah, for sure. Because then that makes me think about, how food systems impact, other natural systems like the land, our water. So what are certain ways that our food system, either the local food system or the global food system, are impacting our natural resources?
Just the water that goes into, watering a bunch of farms. I know that here in Massachusetts, it's been the rain hasn't come as often, I think, as we would like. So there's been a lot of days where it's been super hot. And so with that, the amount of water that goes into it can, definitely rise when we're not getting water from nature. And also on top of that, just, a whole bunch of other logistical things, such as, whether or not you get enough sunlight. That's a resource that we have so much of, and yet I think it can go very, unnoticed. And, making sure that wherever you grow your farm or wherever you grow your individual plot of land or, your own container, it's, you have enough sunlight, you have enough resources to be able to grow your food. And for the global food system, is more gas for travel. That's, as I was mentioning before, gas fluctuates, up and down. And with that, it's a lot of synthetic pesticides as well that go into, just kind of like just a huge blanket of pesticides that go over the crops, and there's no care, there's no TLC that go into the land. That's something that's really important. And for local, it's there's a lot less travel. There is no, I know that some people can just literally walk down the street and boom, they're at a community garden, or boom, they're at the local farm, or they're at a farmer's market. So there's definitely a lot less travel involved in that. And it's a lot easier to be organic. If you follow organic protocols, then you're not gonna have to rely so much on pesticides or all these other things that kind of help the longevity of veggies grow.
Yeah, absolutely. It goes back to earlier, like when you know your farmer and you know your food system, it's going to have a better impact on our planet, right? Which is better for everybody, right? It's better for you. Your nutrient, the nutrients are much more compact. They're going to get to you faster. They're going to get to you more efficiently. And it's, the win-win for everybody.
Really?
So you were talking a little bit about natural resources and soil. We have another question from our Future Farmers of America friends. They would like to know, what techniques and soil amendments do you use to improve your soil quality and productivity at the farm?
That is a fantastic question. And so one way in which we do that is by having compost on our farm, kind of spreading out compost as much as possible, and kind of putting more nutrients into the farm and into the soil, because if we have soil that's really dense in nutrients, then it's going to make the food even that much tastier. On top of that, we also have cover crops in our farming plans, and what that means is that we're not going to grow the same thing on the same part of the field, year after year after year. So we want to, because then that depletes the nutrients in the soil, and with that we kind of we give the soil a rest, and that's ultimately so important, so that next year when we do grow on that part of the land, it's bountiful, and it has all the nutrients that it may have lost from 2-3 straight years of being farmed on. And with that, also having natural fertilizers, such as fish emulsion, which is something that's really popular, to just definitely raise the nutrient level in your soil.
Awesome. We have someone who's thinking about their local food system or how they can grow locally. Rachel Machi from YouTube wants to know, is it possible to grow some fruit or vegetables indoors?
Absolutely, yes. And that's a great segue into a virtual project that I've worked with the youth I've supervised this summer, which is a container gardening project, in which we create videos on how to grow food, from a windowsill, from a really creative container you've built, and it's those videos have been filmed by youth who research these topics and kind of provide a guide as to growing food doesn't have to be as complicated as it may seem, and it's something literally as creative and as intentional as, all right, I'm gonna grow a little basil plant on this pot next to a windowsill in my house that gets a lot of sun. With that, just making sure you water it, and you can definitely grow food from your home. And I encourage it because it's really creative. Right now, with everything going on in the world, it's having access to food can be difficult, and so kind of encouraging everyone, if they can, to kind of grow some sort of food, veggie from their own homes is really empowering as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking about your cabbage slaw, something I like to do is I like to grow cilantro in my windows, and then I add that to my slaw with a little green goddess dressing, and
woo, you're good to go.
Good to go. Got it. We have a question from Ian Bishop from YouTube, who wants to know, how do you decide which crops are best to grow in your area?
Great question. Thank you. With that, we definitely look into our weather, as these New England winters weather can fluctuate. You know, one day it will snow, one year it's going to snow in mid-April, and one day it's going to stop snowing early March. And I think with that, we have to really be super flexible and adapt ourselves to what Mother Nature throws at us in a lot of ways. And so we try to grow crops that are hardy, such as, you know, some broccoli, some spinach, some kale, things that will kind of survive a couple, you know, a frost or two. Nothing too crazy, nothing, you know, nothing below a certain degree of temperature. But, you know, yeah, I think we try to really be mindful about growing things that can withstand a little bit of a chill.
That makes a lot of sense. And thinking that, you know, so we're here from Massachusetts, but we've got folks all over the country watching right now. And we have our Future Farmers of America friends have another question where agriculture for them looks very different than where we are. You know, they live in a really rural area with thousands of acres of row crops, vegetable crops, fruit crops. So he wants to know, can you describe your thoughts on the importance of urban agriculture like that happens at the Food Project?
Absolutely. Thank you. That's a fantastic question. And when it comes to urban agriculture, we like to think of accessibility. You know, making sure that, you know, we support as many people as we can with the foods that we grow. Literally, it's crazy how I'm older than this farm. That's amazing to me. And by that I mean that it's, you know, all this time ago, you know, this a farm, the last thing in people's minds in this neighborhood, in this street, would have been to have a farm in the middle of their street. And so, you know, with the Food Project, really honing in on making sure that food is accessible and making sure everyone has access to food. You know, these are sites that are definitely welcomed and are definitely, you know, something that we try to encourage with as many partners as we can.
Awesome. So we've learned a lot about the Food Project and urban agriculture. So how can folks continue to engage with you, with the Food Project, with urban agriculture? Are there any other opportunities to, you know, volunteer, to work with? How can people stay in touch and continue to work with you after this field trip?
You can definitely stay in touch by following us on our social media at the Food Project. Yeah.
There it is. Always social media.
And I know right now with everything going on in the pandemic, volunteers is something that, you know, the Food Project is working with, how to having people work on the farm. Right now, that's not possible. And, you know, that's something that hopefully as things progress, we can definitely be welcome to more people working on our farms. And ultimately, you know, go to thefoodproject.org, the website, where you definitely see, you know, the work that gets done, the partnerships that have been made, and you know, and a lot more resources that talk about, you know, social justice, food justice, and, you know, why that matters to, you know, your local communities.
Awesome. Well, Omar, thank you again for spending time with us this afternoon. I really appreciate it, especially knowing how hot it was. You braved the elements like a champion. Thank you to our viewers at home for your questions and your engagement. We really appreciate it. So you heard it from Omar first. Please like and follow the Food Project on Facebook and Twitter to learn more about their programs and community offerings. Also, be sure to like the Nova Education Facebook page and Twitter account, whatever we call it now, to learn more about this field trip series. We have our last session next week where we will be discussing the science behind summer flavors. So we talked about tomatoes, cucumbers today. So next week, we're going to think about how to get the most flavor from every bite of some really popular summer crops that you might be seeing at your farmer's market, at your grocery store, or in your backyard. So please tune in next week. Have a great rest of your day. Omar, stay hydrated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, and we look forward to seeing you next week. Take care, everyone.